Richard Davenport stared at his wife's name on the VIP guest list. Then he pressed delete. He thought she was too plain, too simple, too embarrassing to stand beside him at the biggest night of his career. He thought he was protecting his image. He had no idea he was destroying his entire life. Because the woman he just erased wasn't just his wife. She was the woman who owned everything he thought was his. And tonight, she was coming to take it all back. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow until the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this journey travels. Richard Davenport loosened his tie and leaned back in his leather chair. The corner office of Cross Industries smelled like fresh coffee and expensive ambition. 47th floor, Manhattan skyline behind him. Everything he ever wanted right here in this room. His assistant Danny knocked twice before entering. Mr. Davenport, the final guest list for the anniversary gala needs your approval. Printer deadline is in 15 minutes. Rick didn't look up from his phone. Put it on the desk. Danny placed the tablet down carefully. Sir, Mrs. Davenport's name is listed in the VIP section. Should I confirm her security credentials? Rick's jaw tightened. Maggie. He thought about his wife, 53 years old. Gray streaks in her hair, she refused to dye. Wore cardigans that looked like they came from a church donation bin. Spent her weekends baking bread and talking to her tomato plants like they were children. She was fine. She was comfortable. She was everything he didn't need tonight. Danny. Yes, sir. What did Arthur Sterling say when I asked about the chairman of Aurora Group? Danny shifted his weight. He said the chairman might attend personally, sir. No one knows who they are. Very private. Rick smiled. A real smile. The kind that made him look 10 years younger and twice as dangerous. This is it, Danny. Tonight I announce the merger. Tomorrow morning, I'm on the cover of Forbes. The mysterious chairman wants to meet me. Perfect. I'll shake his hand, seal the deal, and this company becomes mine. Really mine. Sir, the company has always been hers. Rick cut him off. His voice dropped cold. Her father built it. Her family name is on the building. But who runs it? Who closed the Asian markets? Who tripled the stock price? Me. I did that. And tonight, I prove it. Danny said nothing. Rick scrolled through the guest list. Senators, tech billionaires, European royalty. The kind of people who mattered. The kind of people who would remember his face, his speech, his power. His finger stopped on one name. Mrs. Margaret Davenport. VIP section. Table 1. She can't come. Danny blinked. Excuse me, sir. Maggie. She can't come tonight. Rick tapped the screen. Delete confirmation appeared. Look at this list, Danny. Every person here is a shark. They smell weakness like blood in the water. And what does Maggie do at parties? She stands in corners. She holds a glass of water because champagne gives her headaches. She talks about her garden. Sir, she's your wife. She's a liability. Rick pressed confirm. Margaret Davenport deleted. Remove her security access. If she shows up, she doesn't get past the door. Rick stood buttoning his jacket. Tell her the event was changed to executives only. Board decision. She'll believe it. Danny stared at the tablet. Something twisted in his stomach. He remembered last Christmas when Mrs. Davenport brought him homemade cookies because he mentioned missing his mother's baking. She remembered things like that. Small things. Human things. Sir, are you sure about this? Rick grabbed his phone. Send the car for Chelsea. She's meeting me at the Ritz. She's coming to the gala as my creative consultant. Chelsea Monroe. Problem. Danny shook his head slowly. No, sir. Rick walked past him toward the door. He stopped, hand on the frame, and turned back. Danny, let me tell you something. I married Maggie when I was nobody, 25 years old. drowning in student loans. She was pretty then, quiet, supportive. She paid my rent when my first business failed. I appreciated it. He paused. But that was then. This is now. I'm not that broke kid anymore. I'm Richard Davenport, and Richard Davenport doesn't bring a housewife to a billionaire's gala. Understand? Danny nodded because he had to. Rick left. The door clicked shut. Danny looked at the tablet one more time. The deletion was final. No undo button. He didn't know that 4 minutes later, that same deletion would trigger a silent alert on a secure server 3,000 miles away. And he didn't know that Margaret Davenport was never ever just a housewife. Maggie was in her garden when her phone buzzed. The Connecticut estate sprawled around her 3 acres of manicured lawns, ancient oak trees, and the vegetable garden she'd built herself over 20 years. The house behind her was worth $12 million, but she preferred being outside hands in the dirt, growing things that were real. She wiped the soil from her fingers and picked up the phone. The notification was simple. Alert, VIP access revoked. Name, Margaret Davenport. Authorized by Richard Davenport. Maggie read it twice. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone across the garden like she wanted to. Instead, something shifted behind her eyes. Something cold. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. She pressed her thumb to the screen. Then her eye to the camera. Then typed a 16-digit code from memory. A black screen appeared. A gold crest materialized. Aurora Group. She tapped a contact marked only as HC. 1 ring, 2 rings. Margaret. The voice was female. Older. Sharp as a surgical blade. I assume you've seen the alert. Hello, Helen. Helen Crawford had been the family attorney for 40 years. She'd handled her father's estate. She'd structured the trust that owned 51% of Cross Industries. She'd watched Maggie step back from the spotlight when she married Rick, and she'd never approved. The deletion came from Richard's personal tablet. He also revoked your building access and marked the event as executives only. Do you want me to reverse it? Maggie walked toward the house, her steps slow and deliberate. No. No. I want to know why. Helen paused. Our sources indicate he's bringing Chelsea Monroe as his guest. The model. They've been close for several months. Maggie pushed open the back door and stepped into the kitchen. Her wedding photo sat on the counter. Rick looked so young in it, so grateful, so different. What else? The FBI has been building a case. Embezzlement from the R&D fund. Safety violations on the new phone battery. Richard authorized production knowing there's a fire risk. He's planning to cash out his stock options tonight after the merger announcement, then file for divorce. Maggie stopped walking. He's planning to divorce me. Our intelligence suggests he believes he'll be entitled to half the company value. He doesn't understand how the trust works. He thinks being CEO means he owns something. Maggie laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. After 25 years. Yes. After I paid his rent. After I funded his first company. After I handed him this job because I thought he was capable. Yes, Margaret. Maggie set the phone down and looked at herself in the hallway mirror. She saw gray hair, wrinkles, a cardigan from Target, the kind of woman people looked through, not at. And beneath all of that, she saw her father's daughter. Victor Cross had built Cross Industries from nothing. He'd taught Maggie everything: finance strategy, how to read a room, how to spot a liar. When he died, the board expected her to step up. Instead, she'd fallen in love with a charming young man who made her laugh. She'd thought she could have both the company and the quiet life. So she'd handed Rick the CEO title and stepped into the shadows. Let him have the spotlight. Told herself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as the company thrived. 25 years. 25 years of watching him take credit for her ideas. 25 years of smiling at parties while people called her Rick's wife, instead of Victor Cross's daughter. 25 years of pretending she didn't notice the late nights, the lipstick on his collar, the way he looked at her like she was furniture. Helen. Yes? What's the status of the clean slate clause in the founding charter? Helen's voice warmed with something that sounded almost like anticipation. Active. In cases of gross negligence or criminal conduct by the CEO, the primary shareholder can invoke immediate termination and asset seizure. You have full authority. And the FBI. Waiting for your signal. They'd prefer a public venue, more witnesses. Harder for his lawyers to claim entrapment. Maggie picked up the phone again. She looked at her wedding photo one more time. The boy in that picture was gone. Maybe he never existed. Maybe she'd invented him because she wanted him to be real. Helen, I need 3 things. Name them. The dress my mother wore to the Aurora Group launch in 1962. It should be in the vault. Done. The sapphire necklace. The one my father gave her on their anniversary. Done. And change my designation on the guest list. I'm not attending as Mrs. Richard Davenport. Helen's voice dropped to barely a whisper. How shall I list you? Maggie walked up the stairs toward her bedroom. At the top, she turned right instead of left. Toward the door, she never opened when Rick was home. The door he thought led to storage. She pressed her palm against a hidden panel. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was a room Rick had never seen, climate-controlled. Security cameras in every corner. Racks of designer clothing she never wore. A safe containing jewelry worth more than his annual salary. And on the wall a portrait of her father with a brass plaque beneath it. Victor Cross. Founder. 1932 to 1998. Never let anyone forget who built the house. Maggie touched the frame. List me as the chairman of the Aurora Group. Silence on the line. Then Helen Crawford, 67 years old veteran of 100 corporate wars, laughed for the first time in 3 years. Maggie, darling, it's about damn time. He deleted me, Helen. He erased me from my own company's anniversary celebration. Because he thinks I'm too plain, too simple, too embarrassing. Maggie pulled her mother's dress from its preservation case. Midnight blue velvet. Hand-sewn diamonds. The kind of dress that made people stop breathing. I'm going to show him exactly what he deleted. And the merger. The merger happens. The company needs it. But Richard Davenport doesn't sign the papers. Maggie held the dress up against herself. In the mirror, she saw someone she hadn't seen in decades. Someone strong. Someone dangerous. Someone her father would have recognized. I do. Back in Manhattan, Rick was feeling invincible. He sat in the back of his town car, Chelsea pressed against his side, her perfume filling the small space. She was 28, blonde, hungry. Everything Maggie wasn't. Baby, you're so tense. Chelsea ran a finger down his arm. Relax. Tonight's your night. Tonight's the beginning. Rick checked his reflection in his phone's camera. Perfect. After I announce the merger, the stock hits 400. I exercise my options. Boom. 90 million in my pocket. And then I file for divorce. Maggie gets half of what's in my name, but she doesn't know about the accounts in the Caymans. My lawyer's already checked. She signed a prenup that says she waives claim to anything I earned through professional endeavor. She thought she was being generous. She was being stupid. Chelsea giggled. She sounds boring. You have no idea. Rick put his arm around her. 25 years, Chelsea. 25 years of watching her make bread and talk about soil pH levels. Do you know what she said when I told her about the Tokyo deal? She asked if I remembered to pack warm socks. That's pathetic. That's Maggie. Rick smiled. But after tonight, she's somebody else's problem. I'm thinking Monaco. A villa on the water. You, me, and 100 million reasons to never look back. The car pulled up to the Ritz-Carlton. Rick checked his watch. 3 hours until the gala. 3 hours until everything changed. He just didn't know it was going to change for him, too. At the Cross estate, Maggie stood in front of her mirror. The dress fit like it was made for her. The sapphires caught the light and turned it into something almost violent. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. Her makeup, done by a stylist who'd arrived by helicopter 2 hours ago, made her look like a stranger. No, not a stranger. Like herself. Her phone buzzed. Danny's name appeared. She answered. "Mrs. Davenport." Danny's voice was shaking. "I need to tell you something. I know it might cost me my job, but I can't. Danny, slow down. Mr. Davenport deleted you from the guest list. He told me to lie to you. He's bringing Chelsea Monroe. I should have said something, but I was scared and I—" "Danny." "Yes, ma'am." "I know." Silence. "You know." "I've known about Chelsea for 4 months. I've known about the embezzlement for 6, and I've known about Richard's character for about 23 years. I just kept hoping I was wrong." Danny exhaled. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. You're a good man, Danny. You showed loyalty to someone who doesn't deserve it, and that's not a fault. It's a strength. But I need you to do something for me tonight. Anything. When everything happens, and I promise you things are going to happen, I need you to stay calm. Don't defend him. Don't try to fix it. Just watch. And when it's over, I'm going to offer you a job. A real job. One where your boss actually deserves your respect." Danny was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Davenport." "Margaret. Call me Margaret." She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Mrs. Davenport won't exist after tonight. She hung up and walked to the window. Outside, a silver Rolls-Royce waited in the driveway. Helen Crawford stood beside it, holding the door open. Even at 67, in a black Chanel suit, with her silver hair pulled into a severe knot, she looked like someone who ate corporate raiders for breakfast. "Ready?" Helen asked. Maggie descended the stairs. Each step felt different, lighter, like she was walking off a weight she'd been carrying for decades. She paused at the front door. On the wall hung another photo. Her and Rick at their wedding. Young, hopeful, innocent. She took it down. Set it face first on the entry table. "I'm ready." The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the estate, and Margaret Cross, not Maggie, not Mrs. Davenport, but Margaret, the woman her father raised, headed toward the city, toward the gala, toward the man who thought he could erase her. He had no idea. In 3 hours, he would understand exactly who he married, and exactly what happens when you try to delete someone who owns everything you have. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had never seen a night like this. Rick Davenport walked through the entrance with Chelsea Monroe on his arm, and he felt like a king entering his kingdom. Cameras flashed. People whispered his name. The red carpet stretched before him like a promise. "Mr. Davenport." "Over here, Rick. Who's the lovely lady?" "Is the merger happening tonight?" Rick smiled his practiced smile, the one that sold stock and charmed investors. He pulled Chelsea closer, making sure every photographer caught the angle. "This is Chelsea Monroe. She's consulting for Cross Industries on our new brand identity." A reporter from Bloomberg pushed forward. "Where's Mrs. Davenport tonight? We expected to see her at the anniversary celebration." Rick's smile didn't waver, not even a millimeter. "My wife is unfortunately under the weather. A terrible migraine. She sends her regrets. Honestly, these high-profile events were never really her thing. She prefers the quiet of home." Chelsea giggled and pressed herself against him. The cameras ate it up. Inside, Rick navigated the crowd like a shark through warm water. Every handshake was calculated. Every laugh was strategic. He worked the room the way he'd worked his entire career, relentlessly, ruthlessly, perfectly. "Julian, great to see you. How's Singapore treating you?" "Senator Williams, thank you for coming. Let's talk about that infrastructure bill next week." "Arthur," There you are. Arthur Sterling stood near the champagne fountain, a glass in his hand and suspicion in his eyes. At 62, Sterling was old money. Oil money. The kind of man who'd seen 1,000 Rick Davenports come and go. Richard? Arthur shook his hand without warmth. I expected to see Margaret tonight. My wife was looking forward to meeting her. Rick's confidence flickered. Just for a second. She's ill. Very sudden. Arthur sipped his champagne. Convenient timing. The company's 50th anniversary, the biggest merger in its history, and the founder's daughter has a headache. These things happen. Do they? Arthur looked at Chelsea, who was checking her makeup in a spoon's reflection. Interesting choice of companion for a corporate event? Rick felt heat rising in his neck. Chelsea is a professional consultant. I'm sure she is. Arthur set down his glass. Richard, let me give you some advice. Free of charge. The Aurora Group is sending their chairman tonight. No one knows who he is. Some say it's a woman. Some say it's a ghost. But whoever they are, they control 60% of the capital backing this merger. If they don't like what they see tonight, they'll love what they see. I've prepared a presentation that will... I'm not talking about your presentation. Arthur leaned closer. I'm talking about character Richard. The chairman of Aurora has a reputation for reading people, for seeing through the performance to what's underneath. You might want to consider what they'll see when they look at you. Arthur walked away, leaving Rick standing with a cold knot forming in his stomach. Chelsea appeared at his elbow. What was that about? He looked angry. Nothing. Old man politics. Don't worry about it. Rick grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter and downed it in one gulp. Let's find our table. But as he walked through the glittering crowd, he couldn't shake Arthur's words. Character. What was underneath? Rick pushed the thought away. He'd spent 25 years building his image. Tonight wasn't about character, it was about winning. And Richard Davenport always won. The dinner service began at 8 sharp. Rick sat at the head table, Chelsea beside him, surrounded by the most powerful people in American business. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt a strange unease he couldn't name. Across the room, Danny sat at a back table near the kitchen doors. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. Stay calm. Watch everything. Trust me. He knew that writing style. He'd seen it on 1,000 handwritten notes attached to birthday gifts and get-well cards. Mrs. Davenport. Danny put his phone away and tried to focus on his water glass. Something was coming. He could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. At the main table, Arthur Sterling rose to welcome the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this historic evening. 50 years ago, Victor Cross built this company with nothing but determination and a dream. Tonight we celebrate his legacy and the future he envisioned. Rick smiled modestly. This was his cue. In 5 minutes, Arthur would introduce him as the man who transformed that legacy into a global empire. Before we begin, Arthur continued, I've received word that we have a special guest joining us, someone who requested a private entrance, someone who represents our most significant partner in the upcoming merger. Rick sat up straighter. The Aurora chairman. Perfect timing. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome. The massive oak doors at the back of the hall began to open. Rick turned in his seat, already planning his approach. He'd shake hands firmly, make eye contact, show strength. The doors swung wide. A figure appeared in the doorway, and Rick's world stopped spinning. The woman standing at the entrance was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet. Diamonds caught the light and scattered it like stars. A sapphire necklace, enormous, ancient, impossibly familiar, hung at her throat. Her hair was swept back in elegant waves. Her posture was perfect. Her eyes were cold steel. Rick knew those eyes. He'd looked into them this morning over breakfast while she asked if he wanted more coffee. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. Chelsea grabbed his arm. Rick, what's wrong? Who is that? Arthur Sterling's voice boomed through the silent hall. Please welcome the founder and chairman of the Aurora Group, Mrs. Margaret Cross Davenport. The champagne glass slipped from Rick's fingers. It shattered on the floor, spraying crystal across the white tablecloth. He didn't notice. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Maggie, no. Not Maggie, this woman was someone else entirely descended into the room with steps that commanded absolute attention. The crowd parted. Phones appeared. Flashbulbs exploded. She walked directly toward the head table, directly toward him. Rick scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his chair. There's been a mistake. That's my wife. She's not the chairman of anything. She gardens. She bakes bread. Hello, Richard. Her voice cut through his babbling like a blade through silk. Calm, controlled, devastating. I believe there was an error with the guest list tonight. Someone deleted my name. She tilted her head, and in that moment, Rick saw something in her eyes he'd never noticed before. Power. Real power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. So I decided to come anyway. Rick's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Chelsea stepped forward, tossing her hair. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is ridiculous. Rick, tell her to leave. She's embarrassing herself. Maggie turned to look at Chelsea for the first time. The younger woman flinched. It was involuntary. Something about Maggie's gaze, the weight of it, made Chelsea want to step backward, to run. Chelsea Monroe? Maggie's voice remained perfectly pleasant. Former model. Dropped from 3 agencies for unprofessional conduct. Currently residing in a studio apartment on West 23rd Street. The lease is held by Meridian Properties, which is a subsidiary of Cross Industries. Which means, technically, I'm your landlord. Chelsea's face went white. How do you know that? I know everything, dear. I know you've been charging personal expenses to my husband's corporate card for 7 months. I know the dress you're wearing was borrowed from a showroom and needs to be returned by tomorrow. And I know you think you've caught yourself a wealthy man. Maggie glanced at Rick and something almost like pity crossed her features. You haven't. You've caught a man who borrowed everything he has from someone else. Me. The room was absolutely silent. 500 of the world's most powerful people stood frozen champagne glasses halfway to their lips, watching a marriage disintegrate in real time. Rick found his voice. It came out strangled. Maggie, sweetheart, let's go somewhere private. You're confused. You're not yourself. The stress of the event, maybe some medication. I'm exactly myself, Richard. Perhaps for the first time in 25 years. Maggie turned to address the room. Her voice projected naturally, filling the space without effort. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I felt it was important for you to meet me properly. She walked past Rick without looking at him, moving toward the podium where Arthur Sterling stood with barely concealed satisfaction. My name is Margaret Cross. My father, Victor Cross, built this company from nothing. When he died, I inherited controlling interest through a family trust. I chose to step back from operations when I married Richard, believing he shared my vision for the company's future. Maggie reached the podium and turned to face the crowd. I was wrong. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Rick stumbled forward. Maggie, stop. Whatever you think you know. What I know, Richard, is documented. Maggie pulled a small remote from her clutch. What I know is that for the past 3 years, you have systematically embezzled funds from this company. What I know is that you approved production of a phone battery you knew was defective because you wanted the stock price to rise before you cashed out your options. What I know... That's a lie, Rick shouted. His face was purple now, veins standing out on his neck. She's lying. She's crazy. Security, get her out of here. 2 security guards stepped forward. They stopped when Maggie raised one hand. I own the building, she said quietly. I pay your salaries. Stand down. They stood down. Rick looked around wildly. The faces looking back at him held no sympathy, no support, just the cold curiosity of predators watching another predator bleed. Arthur. Rick grabbed the older man's arm. "Arthur, you know me. We've played golf together. Our kids went to the same schools. Tell them this is insane." Arthur Sterling removed Rick's hand from his arm, like he was removing something unclean. "Richard, I've suspected something was wrong for 2 years. The quarterly reports never quite added up. The engineering team kept getting overruled on safety concerns. I just couldn't prove it." He nodded toward Maggie. "She can." Maggie pressed a button on the remote. A screen behind the stage flickered to life. Financial documents appeared. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Emails authorizing safety violations. A paper trail so clear, so damning, that several people in the audience audibly gasped. "This is the R&D fund," Maggie narrated. $3 million transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands. "This is the quality control override for the Model X battery, which has a documented fire risk of 6%. And this..." A video began playing. Security footage from Rick's office. The audio was crystal clear. Rick's voice. "I don't care about the safety protocols. Just bypass the regulations. If the battery explodes, we blame the supplier. I need the stock price to hit 400 by the gala so I can cash out and divorce her. She's dead weight." The video ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Rick stared at the screen. His own face, his own words, playing for 500 witnesses. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely a whisper now. "That was private. You had no right. I own the servers, Richard. I own the security cameras. I own the building, the company, and apparently I owned a husband who saw me as dead weight." Maggie's voice cracked slightly on the last 2 words. Just slightly. Just enough to show that beneath the armor there was still a woman whose heart was breaking. But her spine stayed straight. "You were planning to let phones explode in people's hands. Children's hands. To make money. Money you were going to steal from me while filing for divorce." She stepped down from the podium and walked toward him. "Did you think I wouldn't find out, Richard? Did you think I was that stupid?" "I thought..." Rick's voice broke. The arrogance was gone now. In its place was something raw and pathetic. "I thought you didn't pay attention. You were always in the garden, always baking. You never asked about the company." "I never asked because I already knew. Every board meeting, every financial report, every decision you made came across my desk first. I let you believe you were in charge because I thought..." She stopped. Swallowed. "I thought you deserved a chance to become the man I believed you could be." Tears were streaming down Rick's face now. "Maggie, please. I'm sorry. I made mistakes. I got lost. But we can fix this. 25 years, Maggie. 25 years has to mean something." For a moment, something flickered in Maggie's eyes. Memory. Pain. The ghost of the boy she'd married who used to bring her flowers and make her laugh. Then she looked at the screen again. She's dead weight. The flicker died. 25 years meant everything to me, Richard. But apparently they meant nothing to you. She turned to a woman in black standing at the edge of the crowd. "Helen, execute the protocol." Helen Crawford stepped forward, phone already at her ear. "Done." Rick's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again. Then continuously, a vibration that wouldn't stop. He pulled it out. The notifications came like a flood. Face ID not recognized. All payment methods declined. Bank account access revoked. Building security clearance terminated. Tesla key access removed. "What is this?" Rick screamed, shaking the phone like he could force it to obey. "What are you doing to me?" "Everything in your name was leased through corporate accounts," Maggie said. "The car, the apartment, the credit cards, even that phone. As of 30 seconds ago, you don't have access to any of it. My money, I have money. You have money in offshore accounts that, thanks to the evidence I just submitted to the FBI, have been frozen pending federal investigation." Rick's head snapped up. The FBI. As if on cue, 4 figures in windbreakers emerged from the back of the room. FBI printed across their backs. They walked with the calm purpose of people who had been waiting for this moment. Richard Davenport. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s with no-nonsense eyes. "You're under investigation for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to sell defective products. You have the right to remain silent." "No." Rick backed away. "No, no, no. This isn't happening." Maggie called them off. "Please, I'll give you whatever you want. I'll sign everything over. Just don't let them take me." "Richard." Maggie's voice was tired now. So tired. "You don't have anything to sign over. You never did. Everything was always mine. You just forgot where it came from." The agents moved forward. Rick tried to run. He made it 3 steps before 2 security guards caught his arms. He thrashed and screamed, but they were stronger. They dragged him backward toward the door. "You can't do this," Rick screamed. "I'm Richard Davenport. I built this company. I'm somebody." His eyes found Maggie's across the room. "You're nothing without me." His voice cracked with desperation. "You're just a housewife, a boring, plain, invisible housewife. You'll fail without me. You hear me? You'll fail." Maggie watched him being dragged away, the man she'd loved for 25 years, the man she'd built a life around, the man who had just called her nothing. She walked to the microphone. The room held its breath. "I'm not a housewife, Richard." Her voice was calm, clear, final. "I'm the house." She paused. "And the house always wins." The doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off his final scream. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Then Arthur Sterling began to clap. Slow at first, then faster. The senator joined in. Then the tech billionaires. Then the waiters and the musicians and the security guards. Within moments, the entire Metropolitan Museum of Art was shaking with thunderous applause. Maggie didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply stood there, letting the sound wash over her, wondering why victory felt so much like grief. Danny watched from the back of the room. His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. "Report to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. We have work to do." He looked up at the woman on the stage. Margaret Cross. Not Maggie. Not Mrs. Davenport. Margaret. He'd worked for the wrong Davenport all along, and now, finally, he was going to work for the right one. At the head table, Chelsea Monroe sat completely alone. Her borrowed dress felt cheap now. Her champagne had gone flat. And the man who was supposed to change her life was being loaded into the back of a federal vehicle. She picked up her purse and slipped toward the exit. No one noticed her leave. No one would remember she'd been there at all. And at the podium, Maggie looked out at the crowd of sharks who had witnessed her husband's destruction. "Now then," she said, her voice steady, "I believe we have a merger to discuss. Arthur, shall we?" Arthur Sterling stepped forward, his respect evident in every line of his face. "After you, Madam Chairman." Maggie walked toward the main table. Her heels clicked against the floor. Each step was steady. Each step was forward. She didn't look back at the door where they'd taken Richard. She was done looking back. The applause faded slowly like waves retreating from shore. Maggie stood at the head of the platinum table surrounded by the most powerful people in American business. Arthur Sterling sat to her right, Senator Williams to her left, and across from her, an empty chair where Richard should have been. "The merger documents are ready for signature," Helen Crawford announced, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. "All that remains is your authorization, Madam Chairman." Maggie picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. 25 years of standing in Richard's shadow, and her hand didn't shake. She signed her name. Not Margaret Davenport. Margaret Cross. Arthur Sterling countersigned. Then the senator. Then 3 more board members. When the last signature was complete, Arthur raised his glass. To Cross Industries, and to its rightful leader. 500 glasses rose in unison. Maggie drank. The champagne tasted like freedom. But the night wasn't over. 30 minutes later, Maggie excused herself from the table. She needed air. She needed silence. She needed one moment to process what she'd just done. She found a quiet alcove near the museum's Egyptian wing. The sounds of the party faded to a distant hum. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. That was quite a performance. Maggie's eyes snapped open. A woman emerged from the shadows, late 50s, silver hair cut sharp at the jaw, eyes that missed nothing. Victoria Kane, CEO of Kane Media, the woman who controlled half the news networks in America. Victoria. Maggie straightened. I didn't know you were attending. I wasn't, until I heard rumors that Margaret Cross was finally coming out of hiding. Victoria moved closer, her heels silent on the marble floor. I've been waiting 15 years for this moment. Waiting for what? For you to stop pretending. Victoria's smile was thin as a blade. Your father and I were friends, Margaret. Real friends. When he died, I expected you to take his place. Instead, you married that empty suit and disappeared into Connecticut. I thought we'd lost you. Maggie said nothing. I have a proposition. Victoria pulled a card from her clutch. Tomorrow morning, my network is running the story of tonight. Richard Davenport's arrest. The fraud. The defective batteries. It's going to be the biggest corporate scandal of the decade. And I want an exclusive interview. The first public statement from Margaret Cross, not as the wronged wife, as the woman who took back her empire. Maggie looked at the card. Kane Media. Victoria's direct line. Why would you help me? Because your father helped me once, when no one else would. Victoria's voice softened just slightly. And because I'm tired of watching brilliant women hide behind mediocre men. The world needs to see what you did tonight, not as revenge, as justice. Maggie took the card. I'll think about it. Think fast. The news cycle waits for no one. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. Margaret, one more thing. Yes. Your husband is being processed at the federal building downtown. His lawyer is already there trying to arrange bail. Victoria's eyes glittered. But bail requires assets, and from what I understand, Richard doesn't have any assets anymore. Everything was in the company's name, your name. Maggie understood immediately. He's going to call me. Within the hour, I'd guess. He'll beg. He'll cry. He'll promise to change. Victoria smiled that thin smile again. What you do with that call will define who you become next. Choose wisely. She disappeared into the shadows. Maggie looked at her phone. No calls yet. But Victoria was right. Richard would call, and when he did, she would have to decide what kind of woman she wanted to be. Back in the main hall, Danny was collecting his things when a hand touched his shoulder. He turned. Chelsea Monroe stood behind him. Her makeup was smeared. Her eyes were red. The confidence that had radiated from her earlier was completely gone. You work for him, Chelsea said. Richard. I worked for the company. Same thing. Chelsea's voice cracked. Listen, I need your help. I don't have a way home. My phone's dead. And She looked around at the glittering crowd. I don't know anyone here. Danny should have walked away. This woman had helped Richard humiliate his wife. She'd known what kind of man he was and hadn't cared. She'd chosen money over morals, and now she was facing the consequences. But Danny remembered what Mrs. Davenport had said, about loyalty being a strength, not a fault. About becoming someone whose boss deserved respect. There's a car service desk near the front entrance, Danny said quietly. I'll walk you there. Chelsea's eyes filled with tears. Why would you help me? I'm horrible. I knew he was married. I knew he was using me. I just thought... She laughed bitterly. I thought I was using him too. I thought I was smart. We all make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was stupidity. Chelsea wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She knew everything about me. The apartment, the cards, everything. I thought I was playing the game. I was just another piece on her board. They walked together toward the entrance. What are you going to do now? Danny asked. I don't know. Find a job, I guess. A real job. Start over. Chelsea stopped at the car service desk. Can I give you some advice, since I'm apparently an expert on terrible decisions? Sure. That woman, Mrs. Davenport. She's not what I expected. I thought she'd be angry, screaming, vindictive. Chelsea shook her head. She wasn't. She was just powerful. Like she didn't need to be angry because she already knew she'd won. What's your point? My point is, she offered you something tonight. I saw your phone. Whatever she's offering, take it. Don't be stupid like me. Don't bet on the wrong horse. A black car pulled up. Chelsea turned to leave, then stopped. Tell her something for me, if you get the chance. What? Tell her I'm sorry, not because I got caught. Because I didn't see her clearly. I looked at her and saw a boring housewife. I didn't see... Chelsea searched for the right word. I didn't see the queen. She got in the car. The door closed. Danny watched it pull away into the Manhattan night. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a response to that unknown number. I'll be there at 9 a.m. Thank you for the opportunity. The response came immediately. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do. Danny smiled. For the first time in 3 years, he was actually looking forward to going to work. At the Federal Building, Richard Davenport was learning what rock bottom felt like. The holding cell smelled like sweat and desperation. 3 other men shared the space with him, none of them interested in conversation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a sickly green tint. Richard sat on the metal bench and tried to understand how his life had collapsed so completely in less than 3 hours. This morning, he'd been a CEO. Now he was a number. Davenport. A guard appeared at the bars. Your lawyer's here. They led him to a small conference room. His attorney, Gerald Marsh, was already seated. The man looked exhausted. Tell me you have good news, Richard said, collapsing into the chair across from him. I don't have good news, Richard. I have reality. Gerald opened his briefcase. The charges are extensive. Securities fraud, embezzlement, consumer endangerment. The FBI has been building this case for months. They were just waiting for the right moment. Can you get me bail? Bail requires assets. Your credit cards are canceled. Your bank accounts are frozen. The apartment, the car, even your watch was technically a company asset. Gerald paused. Do you have anything in your name? Anything at all? Richard thought. The house in Connecticut was Maggie's. Had always been Maggie's. The offshore accounts were frozen. The stock options were worthless now that the fraud was public. Nothing, Richard whispered. I have nothing. Then you stay here until the arraignment. That's Monday morning. 3 days I have to stay in here for 3 days. Unless someone posts bail for you. Yes. Richard's hands were shaking. Call Maggie. Gerald's eyebrows rose. Your wife, the woman you just publicly humiliated and tried to defraud? She's still my wife, legally. She has to help me. She doesn't have to do anything, Richard. Just call her. Richard slammed his fist on the table. Tell her I need to talk to her. Tell her I'll sign anything. Give her anything. Just get me out of here. Gerald sighed heavily. I'll make the call. But Richard, prepare yourself. She has no reason to help you. After what you did tonight, after what everyone saw, she has every reason to let you rot. She won't. Richard's voice was desperate now. She loved me. For 25 years she loved me. That has to mean something. Does it? Gerald stood. I'll be back. He left. Richard sat alone in the conference room, staring at his reflection in the dark window. The man who stared back was a stranger. No expensive suit. No confident smile. No power. Just a 52-year-old man in rumpled clothes waiting for a wife he'd betrayed to decide his fate. He'd never felt so small in his entire life. The call came at midnight. Maggie was in the back of her car, heading home to Connecticut, when Helen's number appeared on her phone. "He's asking for you." Maggie closed her eyes. What did Gerald say? That Richard needs bail money, that he'll sign over any remaining claims to the company, that he's willing to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for your help. "And what do you recommend?" Helen was quiet for a moment. "Professionally, let him sit. The longer he's in custody, the more likely he is to make a deal with prosecutors. A deal that completely insulates you and the company from any liability. And personally, Margaret, I think you need to decide what kind of ending you want to this story. Do you want revenge, or do you want peace?" Maggie looked out the window. The city lights were fading behind her. The darkness of the highway stretched ahead. "Patch me through to him." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Click. Silence. Then a familiar voice. "Maggie?" Richard sounded broken, completely broken. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. There was nothing left but a frightened man in a jail cell. "I'm here, Richard." "Thank God. Maggie, listen. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, you have to help me. I can't stay in here. I can't survive this. Please." "Why should I help you?" "Because..." His voice cracked. "Because we were happy once. Remember the cottage in Vermont? Our honeymoon. You laughed so hard you couldn't breathe when I fell in the lake. Remember?" She remembered. She remembered everything. The young man who wrote her poetry. The husband who held her when her father died. The partner who promised to build a life with her. Where had that man gone? I remember Richard. "Then you know this isn't me. This isn't who I really am. I got lost. The pressure. The expectations. I started believing I had to be someone bigger than I was. And I forgot." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I forgot who I was with you. Who you made me. I didn't make you anything. You made your own choices. Bad choices. Terrible choices. But they were choices, Maggie, not character. I can change. I can be better. Just give me one more chance." Maggie was quiet for a long time. The car hummed along the highway. The weight of 25 years pressed down on her chest. "Richard, do you know what hurt the most tonight?" "What?" "It wasn't the affair. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the lies." Her voice was steady, but something raw lived underneath. "It was hearing you call me dead weight. It was knowing that for years, maybe forever, you looked at me and saw something disposable, something in your way." "I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did. In that moment, you meant every word. And that's what I can't forgive. Not the crime, Richard. The contempt." Silence on the line. Then quietly, "What does that mean?" "For me." Maggie made her decision. "I'm not going to post your bail." "Maggie, please. Let me finish." Her voice was firm now. "I'm not going to post your bail because you need to understand that actions have consequences. Real consequences. You need to sit with what you've done. You need to feel the weight of it." "So you're just going to leave me here?" "For the weekend. Yes." Richard made a sound that might have been a sob. "But on Monday," Maggie continued, "after your arraignment, I'll instruct Helen to arrange a plea agreement. You cooperate fully with the investigation. You testify against anyone else involved in the fraud. And you accept whatever sentence the judge determines is fair. And then you start over. Without me. Without the company. Without any of the safety nets you thought you deserved." Maggie's voice softened slightly. "I'll make sure you're not homeless, Richard. I'll make sure you have enough to survive. But that's all I'm willing to give you. The chance to survive. What you do with it is up to you." "That's generous," Richard said bitterly, "considering everything." "It's not generous. It's practical. Destroying you completely would make me like you. And I've spent 25 years being shaped by your choices. I'm not going to let your worst moment define mine." Silence. Then, so quietly, She almost missed it. "I'm sorry, Maggie. I'm so sorry." "I know." She felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I know you are. And someday maybe that will matter. But not today. Today I need to grieve. I need to grieve the man I thought you were, the life I thought we had, the future I thought we were building. I loved you. I did love you. Maybe. But you loved yourself more. And that was always the problem." The line was silent for a long moment. "Goodbye, Richard." "Maggie, wait." She hung up. The car drove on through the darkness, and for the first time since the gala, Maggie let herself cry. Not for Richard, for the woman she used to be, the woman who believed in fairy tales and second chances and the fundamental goodness of the man she married. That woman was gone now. But maybe, Maggie thought as the tears fell, maybe the woman who was emerging was someone worth becoming. Someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who would never again let anyone delete her from her own story. The car pulled up to the Connecticut estate at 2 in the morning. Maggie walked through the empty house like a ghost. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her gardening gloves on the patio table, a half-read novel on the nightstand, Richard's coffee mug still sitting in the sink. She picked up the mug, stared at it, then dropped it deliberately on the floor. It shattered. She got a broom and swept up the pieces. Then she went to the wedding photo in the hallway. She took it down, opened the back, and removed the photograph. For a long moment, she held it in her hands. Two young people. So hopeful, so naive. She walked to the fireplace, struck a match, watched the edges curl and blacken, watched 25 years turn to ash. When it was done, she climbed the stairs to her secret room, the room Richard had never seen. She sat down in her father's chair, the chair he'd used when he was building an empire. Her chair now, her empire now. The phone rang. Victoria Kane. "I'll do the interview," Maggie said. "Excellent. Tomorrow at noon. Tomorrow at noon." She hung up and looked around the room, at the portrait of her father, at the documents that would rebuild the company, at the woman she was finally becoming. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "I finally stopped hiding." The portrait didn't answer, but somewhere in the silence of the old house, Maggie could have sworn she heard her father's voice. "About damn time." She smiled. It was a small smile, tired, wounded, but real. And that was enough. For now. 3 months passed like water through open fingers. The world moved on. Headlines faded. New scandals replaced old ones. But in the offices of Cross Industries, everything had changed. Maggie stood at the window of her father's old office, her office now. The nameplate on the door read, "Margaret Cross, Chairman and CEO." She still wasn't used to seeing it. "Ma'am?" Danny appeared in the doorway. He wore a tailored suit now, Vice President of Operations. The title fit him better than anything Richard had ever given him. "The legal team is ready for you." "The divorce papers?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davenport signed everything this morning. Helen says it's the cleanest settlement she's ever seen." Maggie turned from the window. "Clean isn't the word I'd use." "No, ma'am, I suppose not." She walked past him into the hallway. 3 months of rebuilding. 3 months of press conferences and board meetings and sleepless nights. 3 months of becoming someone she'd forgotten how to be. The legal conference room was full when she arrived. Helen Crawford sat at the head of the table, surrounded by junior attorneys and stacks of documents. "Margaret." Helen pushed a folder across the table. "Final decree. Richard waived all claims to company assets, the Connecticut estate, and any future earnings from intellectual property developed during the marriage." What did he get? What you offered. A small settlement. Enough to start over, not enough to live comfortably. Helen paused. He also got 18 months of probation and 500 hours of community service. The judge was lenient, all things considered. Maggie opened the folder. Richard's signature was at the bottom of each page. Shaky, uncertain, nothing like the bold strokes she remembered from their wedding certificate. Where is he now? Queens. Helen's voice was carefully neutral. He's staying with his sister, working at an auto repair shop. Cash under the table while he figures out his next move. An auto repair shop. Apparently he was good with cars before he was good with spreadsheets. Something from his childhood. Maggie stared at the signature. She remembered the day they got married. Richard had been so nervous, his hands shook when he signed the license. She'd thought it was sweet, endearing. Now she knew it was just the first of many performances. Is that everything? She asked. One more thing. Helen hesitated. He requested permission to contact you, directly, just once. He says he has something to say that couldn't go through lawyers. Maggie's jaw tightened. What could he possibly have to say? I don't know, I told him I'd ask. You have no obligation to respond. The room was silent. Every attorney held their breath. Maggie closed the folder. Tell him no. Helen nodded. Understood. And Helen? Make sure he knows it's final. No more requests, no more messages. The divorce is complete. We're strangers now. I'll make it clear. Maggie stood. The chair scraped against the floor. Danny, what's next on my schedule? Lunch with Arthur Sterling. He wants to discuss the European expansion. Good, let's go. She walked out without looking back at the papers, without looking back at 25 years of her life reduced to signatures and legal language. It was over. Finally, completely over. So why did she still feel so empty? Lunch with Arthur was productive but exhausting. He talked about markets and projections and strategic partnerships. Maggie listened, nodded, asked the right questions, but part of her mind was somewhere else entirely. You're not here, Arthur said suddenly, setting down his fork. Maggie blinked. I'm sorry. Your body is sitting across from me, but your mind is 1,000 miles away. What's wrong? Nothing. The divorce was finalized this morning. I'm just processing. Arthur studied her with those sharp old eyes. Processing. Is that what we're calling it? What would you call it? Grief. He said the word without softening it. You're grieving Margaret. Not for him, for who you thought he was, for the life you thought you were building. That kind of loss doesn't heal just because you sign papers. Maggie picked up her wine glass, put it down again. I don't have time to grieve. The company needs leadership. The merger integration is still ongoing. The European expansion. The company survived 50 years without you at the helm. It can survive a few days while you take care of yourself. Arthur leaned forward. Margaret, your father was my friend. I watched him build that company from nothing, but I also watched him work himself into an early grave because he thought stopping meant weakness. My father died of a heart attack. Your father died of pride. He couldn't admit he needed help. Couldn't admit he needed rest. Couldn't admit that some wounds need time to heal. Arthur reached across the table and touched her hand. Don't make his mistakes. You've won the battle. Now take time to recover from the war. Maggie felt something crack inside her chest. The armor she'd been wearing for 3 months, the professional facade, the unshakable chairman. Just a tiny crack. But enough. I don't know how, she whispered. I don't know how to stop. I've spent 3 months proving to everyone that I can do this job, that I'm not just the wronged wife, that I'm worthy of my father's legacy. If I stop now, if you stop now, you'll remember you're human. And that terrifies you. Tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked them back. Yes. Arthur squeezed her hand. Take the weekend. Go somewhere quiet. Don't answer emails. Don't take meetings. Just breathe. He smiled gently. The Empire will still be here on Monday. I promise. Maggie looked at this man who had known her father, who had watched her grow up, who had stood beside her at the gala when the world collapsed around Richard. Why are you helping me, Arthur? You barely knew me before all this. Because your father saved my company once, 30 years ago, when everyone else had written me off. Victor Cross wrote me a check and told me to try again. He never asked for anything in return. Arthur's eyes grew distant. When he died, I promised myself I'd repay that debt someday. Helping you feels like keeping that promise. Maggie wiped her eyes with her napkin. Thank you. Don't thank me, just survive. That's all any of us can do. She took his advice. Friday afternoon, she drove to the cottage in Vermont, the one where she and Richard had honeymooned 25 years ago. She hadn't been back since. The place was smaller than she remembered. A little run down. The paint was peeling and the garden had grown wild. But the lake was still there. Still beautiful. Still peaceful. She stood on the dock and watched the sunset turn the water to gold. Her phone buzzed. Danny. She turned it off. For the first time in 3 months, Margaret Cross was completely alone. And for the first time in 3 months, she let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The anger, the betrayal, the humiliation, the grief. 25 years of loving someone who saw her as a stepping stone. 25 years of hiding her strength because she thought it would threaten him. 25 years of believing in a fairy tale that was never real. She sat down on the dock, dangling her feet over the water, and she cried. Not delicate tears, not dignified weeping. Great, ugly, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the girl who'd fallen in love with a charming boy. She cried for the woman who'd stayed too long in a broken marriage. She cried for the mother she'd never become because Richard always had excuses. She cried for the father she'd disappointed by hiding in someone else's shadow. She cried until there was nothing left. And then, slowly, something unexpected happened. She felt lighter. The weight she'd been carrying for 3 months, for 25 years, for her entire adult life, began to lift. It didn't disappear completely. Some wounds take more than one night to heal. But it lifted enough that she could breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in longer than she could remember. She lay back on the dock and looked up at the stars. I'm going to be okay, she said out loud. To the sky. To her father. To herself. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to be okay. The stars didn't answer. But somewhere deep inside she felt the truth of it. She was going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. And someday was enough. Saturday morning she woke to the sound of birds. Real birds. Not the pigeons of Manhattan. Not the carefully landscaped songbirds of Connecticut. Wild birds. Free birds. Birds that didn't care about mergers or scandals or divorce papers. She made coffee on the ancient stove and sat on the porch watching the lake come alive with morning light. Her phone was still off. She didn't miss it. Around noon, she heard a car pull up the gravel drive. Her body tensed. No one knew she was here. No one except Danny, who had strict instructions not to disturb her. She walked around the cottage. A rental car was parked in the driveway. And standing beside it, looking older and thinner and completely defeated, was Richard. Maggie stopped cold. How did you find me? Richard held up his hands. Empty. Unthreatening. I remembered. You told me once before we were married that this was your favorite place in the world. You said someday you wanted to bring your children here. We never had children. No, we didn't. Richard's voice cracked. That's one of many things I stole from you. Maggie didn't move. You're violating the terms of the divorce. I could have you arrested. I know. Richard took a step closer. Just one step. But I needed to say something. Something that couldn't go through lawyers. Something that wouldn't mean anything unless I said it to your face. Helen told me you wanted to contact me. I said no. I know. I came anyway. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. You can call the police if you want. I probably deserve it. But please, Maggie, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes and then I'll disappear. Forever. I promise. Maggie studied him. This wasn't the Richard she'd married. That man had been confident, charming, larger than life. This man was broken, hollowed out, a shell of what he used to be. Part of her wanted to turn away, to go inside and lock the door and pretend he'd never come. But another part of her, the part that Arthur had called human, wanted to hear what he had to say. 5 minutes, she said. Then you leave. Thank you. They walked to the dock together, sat on opposite ends. The lake stretched between them like all the years they'd wasted. I've been working on myself, Richard said finally. Therapy, twice a week. Court-ordered at first, but now I go because I want to. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I have a lot of issues I never dealt with. Childhood stuff. Insecurity. A pathological need to feel important. You should have dealt with them before you destroyed our marriage. I should have dealt with them before I met you. But I didn't. And instead of getting help, I used you. I used your kindness, your patience, your money. I built myself up by standing on your shoulders, and then I convinced myself I'd done it alone. Maggie said nothing. The thing is, Richard continued staring at the water. I did love you. I know that's hard to believe after everything I did. But in my own broken, selfish way, I loved you. You were the only person who ever made me feel safe. That's not love, Richard. That's dependency. I know that now. He turned to look at her. His eyes were wet. I know a lot of things now. Too late. Always too late. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, silver, familiar, his wedding ring. I've been carrying this around for 3 months. I kept thinking I'd throw it away, into the river, into the garbage, somewhere dramatic. He held it up to the light. But I couldn't, because throwing it away felt like erasing the good parts. And there were good parts, Maggie, weren't there? She thought about Vermont. The honeymoon, the lake, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. Yes, she said quietly. There were good parts. Richard nodded. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for another chance. I destroyed that right a long time ago. He set the ring down on the dock between them. I'm just asking you to remember that once before I became what I became, I was someone who loved you, really loved you, even if I didn't know how to show it. Maggie looked at the ring. Such a small thing, such a heavy weight. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you want, keep it, throw it away, melt it down, it's yours now. Richard stood up slowly, his joints creaking. Everything I had was always yours anyway. I was just too arrogant to admit it. He started walking back toward the car. Richard? He stopped, turned. Maggie picked up the ring, held it in her palm. I forgive you. Richard's face crumpled. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She closed her fingers around the ring. Not for you, for me. I've spent 3 months carrying anger around like a stone in my chest. It's exhausting. It's heavy. And it's not who I want to be. I don't deserve. No, you don't. You deserve to live with what you did for the rest of your life. And you will. But I don't have to carry it with you. She stood up and walked toward him, stopped a few feet away. Go live your life, Richard. Make something of whatever time you have left. Not for me, for yourself. Because if you waste this second chance, you'll have to live with that too. Richard wiped his eyes. I don't know how to start over. I don't know who I am without the company, without the title, without you. Neither did I. 3 months ago, I didn't know who I was either. I'd spent so long being your wife that I forgot how to be Margaret Cross. She almost smiled. But I'm figuring it out, one day at a time. And if I can do it, so can you. Richard stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Goodbye, Maggie. Goodbye, Richard. He walked to his car, got in, started the engine. At the last moment, he rolled down the window. "For what it's worth," he called out, "you were always the best thing about me. I just didn't know how to deserve you." He drove away. Maggie watched until the car disappeared around the bend in the road. Then she looked down at the ring in her hand. She walked back to the dock, stood at the edge, drew back her arm, and threw it as far as she could into the lake. It caught the sunlight for one brief moment, a flash of silver, then it was gone. Maggie took a deep breath, let it out slowly. She felt something inside her release, something that had been knotted for years. Maybe for her entire marriage. It wasn't closure exactly. Closure was a myth anyway. A word people used to pretend that pain had an expiration date. But it was something close to peace, and peace she was learning was enough. Sunday afternoon she drove back to Connecticut. The house felt different when she walked in. Less haunted, less heavy. She went straight to the secret room. Her father's room. Her room now. She sat down at the desk and opened her laptop. 147 emails, 23 voicemails, a stack of documents that needed signatures. But before she dove back into work, she opened a new document. She started to write. Not a memo, not a strategy report, not a press release. A letter to herself, to the woman she used to be, to the woman she was becoming. She wrote about love and loss and the strange relief of letting go. She wrote about her father and his legacy and the weight of carrying it alone. She wrote about Richard and Chelsea and the gala and the moment she realized she'd been hiding from herself for 25 years. She wrote about forgiveness, not the easy kind. Not the kind that pretends pain didn't happen. The hard kind. The kind that says, yes, this hurt, and yes, I'm choosing to move forward anyway. When she was done, she didn't save it. She printed it. Read it once, then burned it in the fireplace. Watching the words turn to ash felt like watching her old self finally peacefully die. And in the ashes, something new was being born. Something stronger. Something wiser. Something ready to face whatever came next. Maggie Cross sat in her father's chair and watched the fire die down. Tomorrow she would return to the office. Tomorrow she would continue building the empire her father had started. Tomorrow she would step fully into the life she'd been avoiding for 25 years. But tonight she was just a woman sitting in the quiet dark. A woman who had survived the worst betrayal of her life. A woman who was finally truly free. And that was more than enough. 6 months after the Gala Cross Industries was thriving, stock prices had climbed 43%. The European expansion was ahead of schedule, and Margaret Cross had become the face of a movement she never intended to start. Her interview with Victoria Kane had gone viral, 27 million views in the first week. Women across the country saw themselves in her story. The wife who'd hidden her strength. The woman who'd finally stopped shrinking. Fan mail arrived by the thousands. Speaking invitations flooded her office. 3 publishers had called about book deals. Maggie ignored all of it. She had a company to run. "Ma'am?" Danny knocked on her office door. "The quarterly meeting starts in 10 minutes. Board members are arriving." "Thank you, Danny. I'll be right there." She gathered her files and paused at the mirror beside the door. The woman looking back was different from the one who'd stood in Richard's shadow for 25 years. Gray hair still, wrinkles still, but something had changed in her eyes. They looked alive. "Mrs. Cross." Danny was still waiting. "There's something else." "What is it?" "A young woman has been waiting in the lobby for 2 hours. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she needs 5 minutes of your time. Security tried to send her away twice. She won't leave." "Who is she?" "Her name is Rosa Martinez. She's an intern in the marketing department." Maggie frowned. "I don't know her." "No, ma'am, but she says you saved her career." Danny hesitated. "She's crying." Maggie looked at her watch. The board meeting was important. The quarterly numbers needed presenting. Time was money, and money was power, and power was everything she'd spent 6 months rebuilding. But she remembered something Arthur Sterling had told her. The Empire will still be here on Monday. Tell the board I'll be 5 minutes late, Maggie said. Bring Miss Martinez to my office. Danny's eyebrows rose, but he didn't argue. 2 minutes later, a young woman appeared in the doorway, early 20s. Dark hair pulled back in a nervous ponytail. Mascara smeared beneath red-rimmed eyes. Mrs. Cross. Her voice shook. I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you're busy. I know this is crazy. But I needed to tell you something, and I didn't know how else to... Sit down, Rosa. The girl sat, her hands twisted in her lap. Take a breath, Maggie said gently. Then tell me what's wrong. Rosa inhaled shakily. I've worked here for 8 months, in marketing. My supervisor is a man named Gerald Whitmore. He's been making my life hell. Maggie's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. In what way? Little things at first. Taking credit for my ideas, excluding me from meetings, telling other people I was difficult to work with. Rosa's voice dropped. Then bigger things. Comments about my appearance. Questions about my personal life. Last week he cornered me in the copy room and told me I'd never get promoted unless I was nicer to him. Did you report this? To HR twice. They said they'd look into it. Nothing happened. Rosa wiped her eyes. Yesterday, Gerald told me he was recommending my termination for poor performance. I have emails proving I've exceeded every target I was given. It doesn't matter. He's been here for 15 years. I've been here for 8 months. Nobody believes me. Maggie was silent for a long moment. She thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet. All the times she'd let Richard take credit. All the times she'd made herself smaller to avoid conflict. All the times she'd been Rosa Martinez. Do you have documentation? Maggie asked. The emails, the performance reviews, anything that proves what you're saying. Yes, ma'am, everything. I've saved everything. Good. Maggie pressed a button on her desk phone. Helen, I need you in my office, now. And bring someone from HR, not the department head, someone new, someone I can trust. Right away, Margaret. Maggie turned back to Rosa. This is what's going to happen. You're going to give Helen every piece of documentation you have. HR is going to conduct a proper investigation, and Gerald Whitmore is going to be suspended pending the results. Rosa's mouth fell open. But the board meeting. The board can wait. Maggie stood and walked around the desk. She sat in the chair next to Rosa's. Close. Personal. I built this company to be better than the one my husband ran. That means when someone tells me they've been harassed, I listen. I act. I don't let it disappear into bureaucratic silence. Tears spilled down Rosa's cheeks. Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means. I think I do. Maggie handed her a tissue. I spent 25 years being overlooked, being underestimated, being erased. Nobody in power ever stood up for me. I had to stand up for myself. But you shouldn't have to fight alone. Nobody should. Helen appeared in the doorway, a young HR associate trailing behind her. Rosa, this is Helen Crawford. She's going to take care of you. Tell her everything. Hold nothing back. Maggie squeezed the young woman's shoulder. And Rosa, you're not getting terminated. You're getting transferred to my executive team. I need people who are willing to speak truth to power. That takes more courage than most people have. Rosa broke down completely. Maggie left her in Helen's capable hands and headed for the board meeting. She was 20 minutes late. She didn't care. The board meeting was a triumph. 43% stock increase. European expansion on track. 3 new patents filed. Customer satisfaction at an all-time high. When Maggie finished her presentation, Arthur Sterling led the applause. Remarkable, he said, shaking his head. Absolutely remarkable. Victor would be proud. Victor would tell me I'm working too hard, Maggie replied. He'd be right. Speaking of which, Arthur pulled an envelope from his jacket. The Sterling Foundation would like to invite you to speak at our annual Women's Leadership Conference next month. 3,000 attendees. CEOs, politicians, activists. We want you to give the keynote." Maggie took the envelope but didn't open it. "Arthur, I'm not a public speaker. I'm a businesswoman." "You're both now, whether you like it or not." Arthur's eyes twinkled. "That interview you did with Victoria Kane changed things, Margaret. You became a symbol. People see themselves in your story. They want to hear from you. They want to know how you found the strength to take back your life." "I'm not sure I have anything wise to say." "Then say something true. That's all anyone really needs." Maggie looked at the envelope for a long moment. 3,000 people. Cameras. Microphones. The entire world watching. 6 months ago, the idea would have paralyzed her. Now, "I'll do it," she said. "But I'm not giving an inspirational speech. I'm telling the truth. The messy, painful, unglamorous truth. If people want a fairy tale, they can watch a movie." Arthur grinned. "That's exactly why we want you." After the meeting, Maggie found herself wandering the halls of Cross Industries. Her company now, really hers. She passed cubicles where young people worked late. She passed conference rooms where deals were being made. She passed the wall of photographs showing the company's history. Her father's face appeared in the earliest photos. Young, ambitious, full of dreams. Her own face appeared in the most recent ones. Older, wiser, full of different dreams. She stopped at a window overlooking the city. Manhattan sprawled beneath her, glittering with lights. Millions of people living millions of lives, making millions of choices. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. A name on a guest list that could be deleted with a single tap. Now she was on the cover of magazines. Her voice reached millions. Her decisions affected thousands. But underneath all of it, she was still just Maggie. Still the woman who liked to garden, who baked bread on weekends, who missed her father every single day. Success hadn't changed who she was. It had just given her permission to stop hiding. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. "Congratulations on the quarterly report. I always knew you could do it. I'm sorry I never told you." Maggie stared at the message. Richard. She should have been angry. He wasn't supposed to contact her. The divorce agreement was clear. But she wasn't angry. She felt nothing. And that she realized was the truest sign that she'd finally moved on. She deleted the message without responding. Put the phone away. Kept walking. The past was the past. The future was waiting. And Margaret Cross had work to do. The conference arrived faster than she expected. 3,000 people packed the auditorium. Cameras lined the back wall. The energy in the room was electric. Backstage, Maggie's hands were shaking. "You okay?" Danny appeared beside her, concern written on his face. "No," she admitted. "I'm terrified." "You faced down your husband in front of 500 billionaires. You can handle this." "That was different. That was anger. That was adrenaline." Maggie looked at her notes. Pages of carefully prepared remarks. Inspirational quotes. Statistics about women in leadership. "This is performance. I hate performance." "Then don't perform." Danny took the notes from her hands. "Just talk. The way you talk to Rosa Martinez. The way you talk to me. Real. Honest. Human." "What if they don't like human?" "Then they're idiots." Danny smiled. "But I don't think they're idiots. I think they're people who've been fed perfect, polished speeches their whole lives. I think they're hungry for something real." The stage manager appeared. "Mrs. Cross, you're on in 2 minutes." Maggie took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. "Danny." "Yes." "Thank you. For everything. For staying. For believing in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself." Danny's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "That's my job, ma'am." "No, it isn't. Your job is operations. This is something else." She straightened her jacket. "When this is over, remind me to give you another raise." "Yes, ma'am." She walked to the wings of the stage. 3,000 people waited beyond the curtain. She thought about her father, about Richard, about the woman she used to be and the woman she'd become. She thought about Rosa Martinez and all the other Rosas out there, young women fighting battles alone, wondering if anyone would ever see them. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman and CEO of Cross Industries, Margaret Cross." Applause thundered through the auditorium. Maggie walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The noise was overwhelming. She reached the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and threw away her notes. 6 months ago, she said, her voice steady, my husband deleted my name from a guest list. He thought I was too plain, too simple, too embarrassing to stand beside him at a corporate gala. He didn't know that I was the one who owned everything he thought was his. He didn't know that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The audience was silent, riveted. But here's the thing. I let him think those things. For 25 years, I let him believe I was less than I was. I hid my strength because I thought it would threaten him. I made myself small because I thought that's what love required. She paused. Let the words settle. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Love doesn't require you to shrink. Partnership doesn't mean one person standing in another person's shadow. And success isn't something you borrow from someone else. It's something you build, something you earn, something you own. She looked directly into the cameras. I'm not here to tell you how to succeed. I'm not here to give you a formula or a 5-step plan. I'm here to tell you the truth. The truth was harder than any speech she'd prepared. The truth is taking back my life was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than running a company. Harder than facing my husband in front of 500 witnesses. Because taking back my life meant admitting that I'd given it away in the first place. It meant looking in the mirror and asking myself why I'd spent 25 years being less than I could be. Her voice caught slightly. The answer wasn't comfortable. The answer was fear. I was afraid that if I showed the world who I really was, they wouldn't like me. I was afraid that if I stepped out of my husband's shadow, I'd find out I couldn't stand on my own. I was afraid of my own power because I'd been taught that powerful women were threatening. We're unlovable. We're alone. She gripped the podium. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Powerful women are not threatening. We're necessary. We're not unlovable. We're just looking for partners who can match us instead of men who need to diminish us. And we're not alone. We have each other. The applause started somewhere in the middle of the room and spread like wildfire. Maggie held up her hand for silence. I want to tell you about a young woman named Rosa Martinez. She works at my company. 8 months ago, she was just an intern. Last week, she sat in my office crying because a supervisor was trying to end her career for refusing to tolerate harassment. The room grew very quiet. Rosa had done everything right. She'd documented the abuse. She'd reported it to HR. She'd followed every rule she was supposed to follow. And nothing happened. Because the system wasn't designed to protect her. It was designed to protect the people who'd been there longer. The people with more power. Maggie's voice hardened. I changed that. In one meeting. Because I had the power to change it. Rosa's supervisor is no longer employed by Cross Industries. Rosa is on my executive team. And HR has new leadership that actually listens when women speak. A cheer went up from somewhere in the back. But here's what I want you to understand. I shouldn't have had to do that. Rosa shouldn't have needed the CEO to personally intervene. The system should have worked the first time she reported the problem. The system should work for everyone, not just for people who have power. She looked out at the crowd. That's what I'm building now. Not just a company. A culture. A place where people like Rosa don't have to fight alone, where women don't have to hide their strength, where everyone gets to be exactly who they are without apology. Maggie straightened. My husband thought he could erase me. He thought I was nothing without him. He was wrong. She smiled for the first time, a real smile, a dangerous smile. I am not nothing. I am the woman who built the house he thought he owned. I am the woman who held the keys he thought he'd stolen. I am Margaret Cross, and I am just getting started." The applause was deafening. 3,000 people rose to their feet. Maggie stood at the podium, letting the sound wash over her. For 25 years, she'd been invisible. Now the whole world could see her, and she was never going to hide again. After the speech, the reception was overwhelming. Hundreds of people wanted to shake her hand, to take photos, to tell her their own stories of survival and strength. Maggie listened to every single one. Around 10 o'clock, she slipped away to a quiet corner of the venue. Her feet ached, her voice was hoarse, but her heart was full. Quite a night. She turned. A woman stood nearby, late 50s, gray hair, comfortable clothes. She looked nothing like the polished executives who filled the room. "I'm sorry," Maggie said. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you." The woman extended her hand. "Eleanor Vance. I was married to a man like your Richard. 30 years. He convinced me I was worthless, that I'd be nothing without him, that the best I could hope for was to be grateful he kept me around." Maggie shook her hand. "What happened?" "He left me for his secretary. Classic story. I was 52. I had no career, no money, no identity outside of being his wife." Eleanor smiled sadly. "I thought my life was over. And now I run a nonprofit that helps women in abusive relationships rebuild their lives. We've served over 10,000 women in the last 5 years." Eleanor's eyes grew bright. "I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because I watched your interview with Victoria Kane and I cried for 3 hours. I saw myself in you. The hiding, the shrinking, the believing we were less than we were." Maggie felt tears pricking at her own eyes. "How did you find the strength to start over?" "I didn't find it. I built it. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Some days I wanted to give up. Some days I didn't think I could keep going. But I did. Because the alternative was staying broken. And I was done being broken." Maggie reached out and took Eleanor's hands. "You're remarkable." "So are you." Eleanor squeezed back. "Margaret, there are millions of women out there who need to hear what you said tonight. Women who are still hiding, still shrinking, still believing the lies they've been told about their own worth. You have a platform now, a voice. Please use it." "I plan to." "Good." Eleanor pressed something into Maggie's palm. A business card. "When you're ready to do more than speeches, call me. Together we could change a lot of lives." She disappeared into the crowd. Maggie looked at the card. Vance Foundation. Rebuilding women. Rebuilding lives. She put it in her pocket. One more piece of the puzzle. One more way forward. One more reason to keep building. The drive home was quiet. Danny had offered to accompany her, but Maggie wanted to be alone. She needed time to process, to breathe, to understand what had just happened. 3,000 people. A standing ovation. A speech that would probably be all over the internet by morning. Her father would have been proud. Richard would have been threatened. And Maggie was just tired. The good kind of tired. The kind that comes from doing something meaningful. Something that mattered. She pulled up to the Connecticut estate at midnight. The house was dark except for the porch light. The garden was sleeping under a blanket of early spring stars. Maggie walked to her favorite bench. The one overlooking the flower beds she'd planted 20 years ago. She sat down, looked up at the sky. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "I finally became who you always knew I could be." The stars twinkled in response. Somewhere in the house, her phone was buzzing with messages. Congratulations, interview requests, partnership proposals. Tomorrow she would deal with all of it. Tonight she was just going to sit here, just going to breathe, just going to be. Margaret Cross. Not Richard's wife, not Victor's daughter, not the chairman, or the CEO, or the symbol, or the story. Just Margaret. A woman who had been deleted from a guest list. A woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of betrayal. A woman who had finally learned the most important lesson of her life. You cannot erase someone who knows her own worth. You cannot diminish someone who refuses to shrink. You cannot defeat someone who has already survived the worst and come back stronger. Maggie smiled in the darkness. The road ahead was long. There would be challenges, setbacks, days when the weight felt too heavy. But she was ready. For the first time in 53 years, she was truly ready. Not because she had all the answers, but because she finally knew who she was. And that was more than enough. Richard Davenport thought he could delete his wife with a single tap of his finger. He thought she was too plain, too simple, too embarrassing to stand beside him. He thought he was protecting his image. He was wrong. Margaret Cross was never plain, never simple, never embarrassing. She was the foundation he stood on, the power behind his throne, the queen he forgot he'd married. And when he tried to erase her, she didn't disappear. She rose. She conquered. She won. Not with revenge, though she could have had it. Not with cruelty, though she would have been justified. But with truth. With strength. With the quiet, unshakable knowledge that she had always been enough. The house always wins, and Margaret Cross was the house. She was the house then. She is the house now. And she will be the house forever. Because real power doesn't come from titles or money or the approval of others. Real power comes from knowing exactly who you are and never ever letting anyone make you forget it.